2 minutes, 2 minutes. Come on in, grab a seat. Lots of seats in. Come inside. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Let's go. Welcome back to Music City again. I want to take a quick second to thank all of our speakers so far. It's been an awesome weekend. Yeah. If you are a contempt prior to investigation guy like myself in our fellowship and skipped the Al-Anon speaker this afternoon, I am very sorry for you. But you can redeem yourself by going and getting a copy of that talk. It was phenomenal. Do yourself. I don't know where she is. I don't see Angie, but that was a great job. So thank you, Angie. Awesome stuff. Everyone's tired of hearing about the parking, the shuttles going. We got lots of buses out there. Be patient. Love each other. Be nice. Lease tapes. I know we're just keep harping about lease tapes, but this conference is kept really cost effective at $25 for a 4-day weekend, which is amazing. If we utilize the hotel's audiovisual stuff, it changes it to like $50, $60 a head. And so we don't have to do that because Lee comes up and does his thing for us, and so support him and buy the weekend. The whole weekend's only $60. Buy individual talks. So support Lee. There's still a chance to buy a chip to be passed out tonight. You can buy it from central office. If you've got one, you can just put it in an envelope and give it to the registration desk. Food trucks will be here the rest of the night, coming and going. Lots of good choices. Also, please sign the big book. We're going to do a countdown tonight, and the person with the least sobriety and the longest sobriety, we'll give them each a book. Next year, it's July 2nd and 5th again. We're not going to be in September. And before the big meeting tonight, there'll be no seats being saved. So, and then after Jason speaks, we'll thank him down here. We don't have to go outside because there's nothing following us. So, if you will, give a warm welcome, Nashville welcome to our meeting chairman, Chance.
My name is Chance. I'm an alcoholic. Let's take a brief moment of silence and open up with the Serenity Prayer. Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And this is the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And now we're going to have Sarah come up and read the traditions.
Hi, my name is Sarah Lynn. I'm an alcoholic. These are the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
And now we'll have Emery come up and we read the 12 steps.
My name is Emery. I'm an alcoholic. These are the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
All right. I am super grateful to be here tonight. Thank you, Steve, for the opportunity. And he had asked me a few weeks ago to do this first time. It's been a great experience thus far. And I had listened to Jason's story prior to this event taking place, and man, it's a powerful one. We've hung out for the last couple days, got to have some fellowship, some small talk and laughs. He's my type of guy, so I'm looking forward to hearing his story in person. Without further ado, welcome Jason.
My name is Jason. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, man, let's get a few things out of the way real fast. My sobriety date's 11/30/07. My sponsor is a guy named Carl M. out of Covina, California. I was his favorite. I kind of fell down the ladder a little bit. So that's why he calls me for Christ's sakes, Jason. I don't understand that, but if you talk to him, he probably has a logical reason for that. I have a home group. It's called The Shed. We meet on Thursdays at noon and Thursdays at 7 o'clock in Oregon City, Oregon. If you're ever in the state of Oregon or you know anybody that's in my state or needs help of any kind on the West Coast, please let me know, and I'll do whatever I can to get them a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I want to thank Lee for taping and getting my name in the hat. I don't really know how to thank Steve because he did this. He came to me. He pointed at that sign. He says, "We've been doing this for 42 years. Don't mess it up." And then he walked off, right? And I'm pretty sure the other speakers didn't get that, right? So thank you for the invite. Thank you for the committee for allowing me to be here. Man, the other speakers have been phenomenal. I was telling Chase that's why I'm Saturday, because I'm just a fill-in. Yeah, they've just been remarkable. I remember the first time I heard Chris's CD, I went to a meeting the next day at a clubhouse. I got in a fight over the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's now a new meeting for the last 15 years in Clackamas, Oregon called the How Meeting. It meets at noon 6 days a week because of that fight. But so there was some good that came out of that and not so good. You know, the last 6 months of my life have been pretty hectic, right? I fell off a ladder. I got diagnosed with cancer. I really shouldn't complain about this, but on Monday I woke up, my eye was swelled shut. But I keep looking at Chris, and he has a patch, so pretty much I got nothing, right? Whatever, God, it was my part. I was having a bad time, right? But yeah, you know, and then there's some friends here I have, you know, and so I'm grateful to be here. And you know, everything I have in my life, it's a value, and you get as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. And last time I was at this event, there was a guy named Sheldon that spoke at a workshop, and he said something that I believe with all my heart today, is that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous works and God is real, right? And when I got here, I didn't believe that. And when he said that weekend, it changed my life. And if you're new here, you're wanted, welcome, and needed in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're struggling, man, you're really welcome. So let's do this so that we can go on to do something greater, like listen to Jeff. But look, my mom and dad got divorced when I was really young. My mom was I didn't see my dad. He took off. My mom was a hippie. You know, I believe they have hippies in Nashville. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure. They smell like patchouli oil, right? You know what I mean? And we lived up in the woods with a bunch of other hippies that smelled the same way my mom smelled. And, you know, we lived in a teepee. We lived in a log cabin. We lived in a school bus before it was popular. You know, we just lived up in the woods, and what I found out later is my mom grew pot for a living, right? And it was a great life as a little kid, right? Because I just run around this woods with a hatchet and a BB gun doing whatever little kids do when you're 5, right? But here's the bizarre thing about that situation. At night, everybody would forget they were hippies because they start drinking and doing whatever they do, and they start beating up on each other. And I'd see my mom get beat up on a regular basis. Right? And I didn't know there was something wrong with that because I'd see my mom hugging that same guy that beat her up the next morning and telling him she loved him. Right? I knew deep down there was something wrong with that because when I felt that violence coming, I would try to de-escalate it by talking really fast, or I'd run and hide. Right? And again, I didn't know there was anything. I just thought that was normal. Right? It didn't make me an alcoholic, but it gave me some skills in life. And you know, as a little kid, I was okay with that. Right? And today, I know that's not correct. Right? When I started going to school, my mom moved to town, and when we moved to town, her house was a party house. It was one of those houses that at 2 o'clock in the morning, there might be 10, 20 people in that house, or at 2 o'clock in the morning, there might not be anybody in that house. And there was nobody there around dinner time. But as a little kid, I didn't have nothing to judge that by. I didn't know people's parents read them bedtime stories. I hadn't made it to school yet, right? So I didn't know those things were going on. Like people had bath times, people went to bed at certain times. I just knew when it got dark outside, I pulled down every blind in the house, I turned on every light, and I turned the TV up really loud, right? That way, if somebody came to break in, they would think there was a party going on, and they would leave. And it worked. I'm here today, right? I used to say kill other people, but I guess that's not correct. But that's just what I did, right? Again, I didn't have anything to judge that by, and I was okay with that. I learned how to make macaroni and cheese on the stove. I learned how to make popcorn on the stove. I learned how to take my own bath. And I was okay with that. But what happened is when I was getting ready to go into the first grade, my life took a dramatic change, right? Because what happened for me, I was at home on a Sunday night watching this show called Happy Days. There's older people than me here, for Christ's sakes. Jesus. It's like not a young people's thing where they Google it and then they laugh like 10 minutes later, right? But I'm watching this show called Happy Days and the phone starts ringing, and it's not like today. You know, today it goes to voicemail or it tells you who's calling on the TV. Back then it rang until that person gave up, right? Or you answered it. And the phone wasn't at a convenient place. It was in the kitchen on the wall, right? And so you had to go into the kitchen, pick up the phone, take the cord all the way around the corner and try to see what TV was coming back on. But unfortunately for me, it was my grandma, right? And I don't know if there's any grandmas in here, right? My sponsor says I have a Hallmark story, so that's kind of harsh too. But it was my grandma, right? And she's really invested in my life at that moment in time, right? She wanted to know, do I have all my clothes laid out? Am I excited to go to school? Have I eaten dinner? Have I taken a bath? Stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with Happy Days. And I'm just telling her yes because I need her to get off the phone, right? And finally, I told her, Grandma, I got to go. My show's back on. And she said, Sweetie, let me talk to your mom. I said, oh, my mom's not here. She's at the tavern. The phone number's 282-4440. If you call there, this guy named Floyd will answer the phone, ask for Darla. She'll come to the phone and tell you she's having one more pitcher of beer and she'll be home. You know, and there was kind of like a long pause, which was probably 5 to 10 seconds at that time, but it seemed long. And I said, Grandma, I got to go. She said, Sweetie, give me that number again. And I gave it to her. And she said, when your show's over, I want you to listen to what the teachers, when you go to school tomorrow, listen to what the teachers say and be kind to the other kids. Right? And that's basically what Carl tells me today, really, is be kind to others and generous with my time. And I said, okay, and I got off that phone, and now I'm watching this show called Laverne and Shirley, right? And so some people know where I'm coming from, right? And I'm watching this show called Laverne and Shirley, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the door, right? And I kind of panic because nobody knocks on the door, right? Even though I have all these stuff set up in case somebody does. And all of a sudden they start beating on the door, and I just know I'm going to die, right? So I crawl underneath this coffee table, and I start building the fort because I don't want to die, right? And then I could hear them wiggling the screen and saying, you know, making noise, and I just know they're coming through the window. Then all of a sudden I hear this voice say, Jason, it's Grandma, come open the door. And man, just like that, I got relief, right? Just like that, because Grandma's Grandma, right? And I opened up that door, and my grandma's standing there, and she didn't look like Grandma. She looked like she'd been crying. She looked like she was upset. She just didn't have that happy-go-lucky Grandma look. And she said to me, Sweetie, get your stuff. You're coming to live at my house. That's like hitting the lottery. Right? When you go to Grandma's house, there's Rice Krispie treats, there's homemade cookies, there's popsicles in the freezer, there's sheets on the bed. The sheets match the pillowcases. But most importantly, there's somebody there all the time. That's an easy sell for a little kid. So I grab my stuff, I jump in her car, we drive to her house, I run up the stairs, I'm headed through the front room, man, because I'm headed to the kitchen, because that's where all the good stuff is, and I hear this, hey! And I turn around, it's my grandpa. He's like, what are you doing here? I was like, man, I live here. I didn't know my grandma didn't run it by him. I found out later. But what he did, he looked right at me. He says, yeah, you do, buddy. Come here. And he gave me a hug, and I fell asleep on that man's lap for the next 4 or 5 years, every single night, because he made me feel safe. I wasn't an easy kid. I ended up in AA. Right? Look, I'm the kind of kid, this is how I sum it up like this. My grandma would take me to Sunday school on Sunday mornings, and she'd push me in the Sunday school class and tell them he has an enthusiasm for life, and then she would take off down the hall, right? My grandpa would drop me off in the same Sunday school class, and he'd push me in there, and he'd look at everybody and say, hey, don't let his cuteness get in the way of your common sense. He's either going to be in trouble or talking his way out of trouble. That's all that kid knows how to do. And he would leave, and I used to think that was bizarre, right? But here's the thing. I obviously had issues because I remember being in I was in the 3rd grade when I did this, and it was Miss Bowe's class, and we were going to dress up on Fridays what you wanted to be when you grow up. And this was like a Wednesday, right? And she was going around the classroom asking everybody what they were going to be. And there was like police officers, there was firemen, there was doctors, there was a president of the United States. There was just a lot of good stuff. And she got to me and she said, Jason, what are you going to be when you grow up? I said, a bank robber, right? I don't even know where that came from, right? And I couldn't quit my job, right? Because some of my friends quit what they were going to do and joined my gang. And so I was like committed to being a bank robber. And You know, I went home that day with a note, and I came back on Friday as a rodeo clown. So I'm not sure what happened there, but I wasn't a bank robber. But I remember that Sunday after that happened, I remember sitting out under the apple tree with Stevie. And Stevie was going to be a police officer when we grew up. And so we were figuring out how we could practice doing our jobs. And I told him, there's no banks on the block to rob. And he said, yeah, but there's a Kool-Aid stand. Right? And so I did what every good bank robber does. I went and got me a cowboy hat, a BB gun, and a bandana. And I rode up to the corner Kool-Aid stand and I robbed it. And it just didn't go well. Right? Because they had no money. The first thing, right? I took my mask off, and so they knew who I was. So everything was going sideways, right? But I'm not an idiot. So I said, here's the deal. I'll take this kid back to my backyard. You guys go get your piggy banks and meet me in my backyard, and I'll give you your friend back, right? And so I took a hostage right off the bat, right? And so I took this kid to my backyard, and I tied him up to the clothesline pole, and this is something they don't show on TV, right? What to do when your grandma yells dinner in the middle of a robbery, right? And so, right here, because at 5 o'clock on Sundays, if my grandma yells dinner, if you don't go eat, you don't go eat, right? And so I told this kid, hey, I got to go eat dinner. I'll be back in like 20 minutes, right? And I made another mistake. I put my BB gun and my bandana and my cowboy hat down, and I went inside and I'm eating dinner. And everything was fine until a police officer arrived, right? And then when the police officer arrived, it's not like today where the people have videos and all that. Your whole neighborhood showed up, right? So my whole neighborhood is in my backyard with this police officer, and this kid's crying like a little sissy. And I'm trying to explain to my grandma the knots weren't that tight when I tied him. He's squirming, it's his fault. And, my grandpa just starts laughing, like really loud, right? And my grandma's like, what's so funny? He goes, man, you can't make this up. And then everybody started laughing, right? And when they started laughing, that sent my grandma in a tailspin, man. She just went sideways. And she's like, get in that house. You're grounded for 30 days. I'd never been grounded before in my life. But that sounded like a punishment, right? So I started crying, right? And I'm headed to the house. And all of a sudden, my grandpa said, hold on, buddy. And he took my grandma behind the house because back then you didn't argue in public, right, I guess. And he took my grandma back there and he did some negotiation. And he came back. He said, look, I didn't rob that Kool-Aid stand, and I didn't tie that young man up to the clothesline pole. So there's no need to punish me by grounding you to the inside of the house, right? You're grounded to the block, man. And right then, that guy became my hero, right? He taught me when you get caught to share in a general way. He was a great crime partner until I got older, and then he became a nuisance. That's his word, right? He would turn me in. He'd tell the cops where I lived. He would tell the judge how much money I made. I just think he hated me, right? And as I got older, we just grew farther and farther apart, right? What I know today is he was a good man, right? He was a good human being, and he's the kind of guy that if he dropped a quarter on the ground, he'd spend $1 to get it back to you if he knew it was yours, right? He was just a good human being, but a kid like me, man, we just grew apart and we fought all the time. You know, and so as I got older, we separated. My grandma, on the other hand, I don't know if anybody in here has anybody in their life that just wouldn't give up on them, right? Or just had their back no matter what. And that's how my grandma was, right? And for the longest time, I thought my grandma just felt sorry for me, right? I thought because if one of my aunts and uncles went on vacation, they had to take me. If I had a baseball game or a soccer game, everybody came, right? And I know that's because my grandma told them to do that, not because they wanted to. And so I thought she just felt sorry for me. But I remember being in the 6th grade, I started going to middle school, and I started having to take a school bus to school. And yeah, it's the damnedest thing. I got kicked off the school bus. You know what I mean? And it was my first day to walk home, and I'm like, man, this sucks. And I'm walking out, and all of a sudden here comes my grandma coming in this school, and I'm thinking, man, this is great. She's going to give me a ride home. She says, sweetie, we need to go talk to some people in the office. That's like a Tuesday for me. So I'm like, okay. You know, and we go in there, and we sit down at this table, and it was different. That day, there was a round table, and there was a teacher, a principal, a lady from a special needs school, and a couple counselors on one side of the table. And then my grandma and I sat on this side of the table, and they proceeded to tell my grandma everything I'd done wrong in the first 3 months of school. That I couldn't read and write at that level, that I was stealing stuff, I was hitting people, I was talking all the time. They made me sound really bad. And I remember just sitting there looking at my grandma, and she had that same look on her face like when she was at that front door where she was just trying not to cry. Right? And when they got done, she goes, may I say something? And I thought to myself, that's about time, right? And they said, sure. She said, look, I'm not going to deny Jason did any of those things, which wasn't what I was looking for, but she said, he's a good kid. And the reason I know he's a good kid is because every morning he runs down to Mrs. Harrington's house and he throws her newspaper up on the front porch so she doesn't have to come down the stairs. And the young man, Shane, who's simple-minded, every time I see him at the grocery store or church on Sunday, the first thing he asks is, where's Jason? Because nobody picks on him when Jason's around. And when they play sports, Jason always picks him first to be on his team. Nobody told him to do those things, so there's a good kid inside of there. We need to tap into that, right? And I ended up leaving that classroom, and I had my best year of school ever, right? But I remember walking out, and I looked up at my grandma for the first time, believing somebody loved me, right? I had never felt that connection where somebody had my back. And, man, she became my best friend. Wherever she went, I went, you know. Yeah, she was just it. She just never gave up on me, and I never gave up on her. But here's what happened. That kid I tied up to the clothesline pole, Sean, he became one of my best friends, so I guess I need Al-Anon. I took a hostage right off the bat, right? Literally. And we went over to spend the night at this buddy Leif's house in the backyard. And I don't know about here. It's not hot in Oregon like it is here. So when it rains a lot, but if there's one sunny day, everybody sleeps in the backyard. And we're going to sleep in Leif's backyard that night. So we're out there setting up our little camp for the night. And all of a sudden, my friend's mom, Molly, comes out. She says, hey, there's $10 on the counter. We ordered you guys a pizza. Pay the pizza guy when he gets here and stay in the house. All the adults are going bowling, right? And when you're in the 6th grade and you get a house to yourself with a telephone back then, yeah, somebody's refrigerator's run in some country. We don't know. You always start dial with 1, right? So that kind of bites you in the butt when you get a little... Yeah, so they left, and the pizza came. We paid the guy like they said to, and right before we got ready to eat the pizza, my friend Leif says, hey, pizza tastes better with beer. I'd never drank beer before, but I said, yes, it does. And he went downstairs, and he brought up a case of Lucky Lager beer. Yeah, it was nasty, right? I hear these people say that they take a drink, and they felt like they arrived. They take a drink, and they felt bigger than life or whatever. Man, I took a drink, and it was nasty. Man, I had to plug my nose and hang in there, right? But let me tell you, about an hour and a half into this thing, man, I'm having a blast, right? I'm in the backyard doing whatever you do when you're drinking at that age. But the damnedest thing happened, man. I got food poisoning, right? And it ruined it, right? I just got sicker than a dog, right? I was like, man, I looked at my buddy. I said, something's wrong with that pizza. I don't feel good. And so I rode my bike home, and my friend Leif came to hear me talk. He said that was probably my first DUI. And I rode my bike home, and I went in the house. I told my grandma I don't feel good. She looked at me with just disgust, right? And I went in my room, and I was sick all night. And that lady didn't do her job, right? Grandmas are supposed to put a towel on your pillow. They're supposed to bring a bucket for you to get sick in. There's supposed to be night lights. There might even be a fan. The doors are cracked, and somebody checks on you all the time. Nothing from that lady. She didn't do her job. And I'm sick all night, right? And finally, I fall asleep, and I wake up the next morning, and my grandpa's at the end of my bed yelling, get up, you got to go to work. I was like, man, I don't feel good. He said, get up, you got to go to work. I said, I don't have a job. He said, if you're going to drink like a big boy, you're going to work like a big boy. Now let's go. And I thought for sure my grandma would stop this mess I was involved in, right? But no, she didn't. As I was walking out, she handed me a warm egg salad sandwich and a thermos of warm milk and told me, have a great day. Yeah. Turned on me just like that, right? And we went over and we picked up Leif and Sean, who looked just as bad as I did, right? And my grandpa took us to pick strawberries, right? It's against the law for a minor, anybody under 12 years of age, to pick strawberries in the state of Oregon, and not one kid has thanked me. Not one kid. Nobody's ever called me and said, hey, that was a good law. Right? But we picked strawberries, man, and I was sick. I picked strawberries, got sick. Picked strawberries, got sick. Picked strawberries, got sick. I think I made 27 cents the whole day, something like that, right? But I remember about the 5th time getting sick, I looked at my buddies, I said, man, I'm not drinking anymore. And my friend Sean says, you don't like alcohol? I said, I don't mind the alcohol. I just don't want to work, right? So I quit cold turkey. No AA, no 12 steps, no treatment, man. I'm just done, right? And man, I did really well until I got to high school. And because of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I believe this is where I realized my obsession kicked in. Because what happened is I played sports during the week and we drank on the weekends. But what I was doing after I did my inventory of my steps is I realized I was saving my lunch money Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, pitching it in with some other guys, shoulder tapping and drinking on the weekends. Nobody was going to jail. Nobody was dying of a heroin overdose. Man, we just had fun. We played sports and we drank. We played sports and we drank. You know, and my life was great. I had a great childhood up to that point. On May 5th, 1989, I Carl says I have to tell you the truth, and Steve will probably rat me out. So I stole a motorcycle. I used to say I borrowed it, but I stole this motorcycle, and I got in a high-speed chase, I guess, and I woke up in an ICU in a hospital not knowing what's going on. It's one of those rooms where there's just a sliding glass door, right, and you're on all this tubes and all this stuff, and I don't know about you, but when you come to like that, the first thing you yell is, I'm alive, right, because I want everybody to know I was alive, and this nurse came in and said, we know you're alive. And I said, hey, what happened? She said, you're in a drunk driving accident on a motorcycle. I said, well, I don't own a motorcycle. And she said, we know. And I said, oh. I said, am I going to die? She said, you're not going to die, but you'll probably lose your left leg. And if you don't lose your left leg, you'll never walk normal again. Man, and I just remember that blow of crushing, right? And I told myself right then and there, I'll never drink alcohol or put anything else in my body ever again. You know, and about 2 weeks after getting that, Chris talked about last night, that anxiety, that fear that I didn't even know existed showed up. Right? And the only thing that would take that away is alcohol. Right? If I put that in my body, I felt okay. What I did is I just lowered my standards to keep up with my quality of life. Right? So eventually I'm living in an abandoned house. It's somebody's uncle's house until the police come. I don't know if they have them in Tennessee. It's the one that has no power, no water. Yeah, and I lived in one of these houses, and I was okay with that. Right? I was okay being that guy, because as long as I put alcohol in my body, I'm okay with the decisions I'm making. And I would do that over and over. But here's the problem. When you have a big family, about once a month, one of my uncles would show up at wherever I was staying, and they would drag me down to a payphone. I'm like, what's going on? They said, you got to call Grandma. And I go, why is that? And they go, because she calls every jail, every hospital, every institution. Then she calls all your friends, and then she calls all of us every morning. Is Jason? Anybody seen Jason? Is Jason alive? Can somebody please go find Jason? Could you call her and tell her you're okay so she'll leave us alone? I was like, all right. And I call my grandma, and I would tell her, Grandma, I'm doing really good. I'm working out of town. I have a great job. You know, and I tell her I was going to come see her. You know, I'm not a bad guy, and I'm not a bad kid, but when I put alcohol in my body, I rationalize why I don't show up, right? And what I do is when I don't see you face to face, I'm not lying to you, and I'm not stealing from you, and I'm not cheating you. So I'm actually doing you a favor, right? And that's how I justify not going to see my grandma. But every once in a while, it would get really bad, and I would go there to get $5 to $10, you know, to do what you have to do or whatever. And I'd sit at her kitchen table every time I went over, and she'd tell me she loved me and she was going to pray for me, and she'd tell me all these things that she had going on. And then she would get up to go to the bathroom. When she'd get up to go to the bathroom, she'd always leave $5 to $10 sticking out of her purse or leave it on the table, and I'd grab that money and I'd run. Right? And I would do that over and over and over. And what I didn't realize is I was killing that lady. She didn't have an Al-Anon. She didn't have that. She went to church every Sunday and every Wednesday, and she just prayed for me. Right? I didn't know I was slowly killing that lady. And I would do that over and over and over and over. You know, and when you put alcohol in your body, everything's great. Right? I can get through anything. On December 5th, 1997, my Uncle Leroy, who's a big biker guy, showed up at my tent. I had got kicked out of a abandoned house, and I was living in a tent before that was popular. And at least in Oregon, it's popular. I don't know about here. But I was living in this tent, and my Uncle Leroy showed up. My Uncle Leroy showed up. He said, hey, your grandma's been in ICU for a couple weeks. They took her off of life support. You should probably come say goodbye. I said, I don't really want to go. He said, I didn't ask if you want to go. You're going to go, right? And he's a big biker guy, so I went. But as soon as we got in his truck, the first thing he did is he handed me a pint of vodka, and he told me, just chug it. Right? And I chugged that pint of vodka, and by the time we got to that hospital, I was okay being a piece of crap that's not going to amount to anything. Right? I was okay being that guy. Right? Because I'm the kind of guy, look, I was explaining this to somebody at the end of my run. I remember being at a drug house buying dope from these guys that don't speak English. And a commercial for a treatment center came on, and they all stopped and looked at me. Right? And I was buying a pound of dope from them every day. I thought, man, I should be their best customer. And they're like, you need to go there. Right? And I'm the kind of guy that when I got invited to something, it was always after it ended. Right? I'm the kind of guy that if you left your purse somewhere, I would steal it. Right? I was just that guy in my family. And, you know, when I got off that elevator, I knew I was that guy. But I was okay being that guy because I had booze in my body. And I went over and I sat on this side of the room. My whole family's sitting on this side of the room because only a couple people could go in at a time. And my grandma hadn't been awake or something like that. And so my mom didn't even come over and say hi to me. Right? And finally my aunt came over and she said, you need to get in there, say goodbye, and just get out of here. And I said, okay. And I went in there. My Uncle Gary, who's in the program, and he's like a brother to me now, he was sitting there, my Uncle John. My Uncle Gary said, just talk to her like she's here. She hasn't had her eyes open all day, but she can hear you, right? So just grab her hand and talk to her like she's here. And don't worry about how long it takes. Stay as long as you need to stay. And I said, okay. And I sat down and I started talking to her and I grabbed her hand and she opened her eyes. And then she started talking back to me, man, and I panicked, right? Because everybody was trying to get in that room to see her because people had flown in from everywhere. And I did the only thing I know how to do is I told Grandma I have a really good job, right? But there's a lot of people here that would like to see you. I'll come back tomorrow and see you. And she said, okay. She told me she loved me and she was going to pray for me. But the worst part was, as I was walking out of that room, she told my Uncle Gary, he's a good kid. You watch, he'll do something with his life. He's going to do something with his life, man. And I just nutted up. Man, and I went back to my tent and I drank the way you drink, right? And a few days later, my Uncle Dale showed up to let me know my grandma had passed and that his family would pick me up to take me to the memorial. And I said, okay. And the day of that memorial came, I hid in an abandoned house with some Goldschlager and some Jägermeister, and I hid in the closet and I didn't come out, right? Because when I put booze in my body, it's okay to sit in there. Because I don't want to embarrass you. I don't want to show up and ruin your funeral, right? That's what goes through a guy's mind like mine when I put booze in my body. I can justify why I don't show up for the person that loved me no matter what. You know, and I could hear him out there saying, you're going to regret this for the rest of your life. And I just blew it off, right? 2 weeks later, man, I hadn't had anything in my body for about a week, man, and I was detoxing from the inside out, and I was just miserable. And it was a Sunday morning, and I figured, well, I'll call my Uncle Gary and see if he's going to go to church, right? Because I knew he wouldn't beat me up in church. I knew he was going to beat me up, right? Because we're like 8 years apart, and we grew up in the same house, and he's beat me up a lot, right? But I didn't think he'd beat me up in church. So I called him, asked him if he's going to church. He said he was. I go, can I meet you there? He said, absolutely. And we get to that church, and I sit in this pew, and I'm at this end, and everybody else is at this. The whole church is on this side, and I'm at this end. I guess I hadn't shaved or showered in a while, and I just didn't look too well. But the damnedest thing happened, man. They started singing this song, How Great Thou Art. Yeah, I don't even know where that... Man, I started kind of crying. Then they sing that dang song, Amazing Grace, and I just got caught up in the moment, right? And I looked at my uncle and said, man, I think I have a drinking problem. He's like, you think? And the whole church went quiet. My aunt said that was the song was over. But up to that moment, I thought everybody was waiting for my answer. And I said to him, I might have a drug problem too if it makes you feel better about yourself. And this is what he said to me. No lie at all. This is what he said. Come to my house. We'll feed you. You can shower. We'll wash your clothes. And I'll give you $20 and you can figure out how you're going to fix your life. You could put a gun to my head. That's what I heard. I went to his house. I got in the shower. When I came out, he said, hey, you're going to go to treatment. I go, what's that? He goes, this is no time for negotiations. There's a phone book, which is Google. The old-fashioned way. He says, you're going to go to treatment, look up treatment centers. Well, I didn't think treatment centers were open on Sundays, right? So the first hospital I found was Portland Adventist. It was at the top. And so I called this lady. I said, hey, my uncle thinks I have a drinking problem. Boy, she got all excited. And she patched me over to another person. I told this person I might have a drug problem. And she's like even more excited. She said, can you be here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to do an assessment? And I was like, well, yeah. I ain't got nothing else planned, right? And so I got off the phone. I told my uncle, hey, give me $20. I have an assessment. I'll tell you how it went. All's good. He said, no, you're going to stay the night here. I'll take you. Whew. It got bad really fast, right? I had to sleep on his couch. I'm here to tell you, he'll tell you he has a leather couch. It's plastic, right? And as soon as I flipped one time, the sheet was gone, and he had a dog that licked me all night, right? So I'm sweating. I'm miserable. This dog's licking me all night. It's not how you want to start your first day of sobriety, I guess, right? And I get up the next morning, he looks at me and says, man, you need to take another shower. And I said, yeah. And so I got up, took a shower. And when he went to the shower, all of a sudden I remembered he had a liquor cabinet. Right? And I went and got a pop out of the refrigerator. I got some Bacardi 151 out of his liquor cabinet, poured it in that pop can. I started drinking it. By the time he's out of that shower, I'm ready to go to whatever this treatment thing is. I'm all in, baby. Right? We get in his truck, and I'm drinking my soda with my alcohol in it. And he looks at me and goes, man, I smell alcohol. I said, it's not me. I'm going to treatment. I guess that's what everybody says, right? So I made another vital mistake, right? When we got to that treatment center, I went to go hide my pop can so nobody would find the booze. He went in, he answered yes to something. I'm in this detox center. It was December 29th, 1997. I'm here to tell you I don't want to judge or anything, but it was the worst treatment center you could possibly be locked up in, right? It had no caffeine, it had no sugar, and it had no women, right? And yeah, I was living in a tent and some bushes, but those are big deals, right? When you're 26 years old, right? And so I'm trying to figure out, I didn't know if you're in treatment, don't take this. You can just leave, right? I didn't know you could just leave. I thought it was like prison. I thought you had to escape. So I'm watching shift changes. I'm watching the counselors go up and down the elevator. I'm going to bail out of this place, man. As soon as we can figure out how to get out of here, I'm out, right? But there was 4 other guys in this thing on December 29th, and they started talking about this thing, Alcoholics Anonymous. And man, when you don't have much to do, you say, hey, what's Alcoholics Anonymous? Man, and they started talking about it, but here's the miracle that changed me. They said to me, there's caffeine, there's sugar, and there's women. I was like, yeah, how do we get there? I said, a van's going to pick us up and take us. I was like, even better, I'll escape from there. Right? So now I got a plan, right? We get in this van, but I need to tell you, about 3 years before I ended up in this detox center, my dad had called my mom out of the blue to pay back all the back child support he owed. And I went to this bank for, it depends on who you ask, I say a couple minutes, he says 45 seconds. My mom said, you just got your money and ran. I went in there, I said hi to this guy, I took my half of the money, which I had to pay back because of sponsorship. And I said hi to this guy and I left, right? And I'm in this, I don't need a dad, right? But lo and behold, 3 years later, I'm in this van going this thing called A&A, and I pray to a God that I don't believe in. Whatever you do, God, please don't let me know anybody in AA, and if I do, please don't let me owe him any money, right? And that's the only prayers I had. I didn't want to, I wasn't trying to stay sober. I just didn't want to know anybody. We get to this AA meeting, and there's caffeine, there's sugar, and there's some ladies in this meeting, right? And so I'm looking around who I'm going to marry, who's going to bust me out of this detox treatment thing, what I'm locked up in. I got to find somebody, right? And I see a guy standing in the back up against the wall, and I looked at these guys. I said, hey, that looks like my dad. They said, you don't know who your dad is? I said, I've seen him one time in 26 years. And they said, well, you got to go say something. I was like, I don't even know if this is not overreact, right? And so there was a break in the meeting, which I don't go to meetings with breaks anymore. But I walked up to this guy, and I said, hey, do you know who I am? He said, nope. I said, I think you're my dad. And he said, Jason? And I said, yeah. And I met my dad at my very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it changed my life, right? When I was a little kid, my grandma used to tell me dorky stuff like you have to participate in your prayers. Like I told her, hey, I prayed to win the game on Saturday. She'd tell me go to practice. Or I told her I prayed for a bike. She told me to mow the lawn. And she's a big believer in participating in your prayers. But one thing she used to always tell me is God never says no. God either says yes, not right now, or I got something better, which I used to think was the dumbest thing in the world. But I'm here to tell you, I remember being like in this 5th or 6th grade, coming home on Friday and sitting on my grandparents' front porch, waiting for my mom or dad to come pick me up on a Friday, and they wouldn't come. Right? And I remember sitting out there, and the street light came on. I went inside. I told my grandma, hey, I'm not going to your Sunday school anymore. And she said, why is that? I said, I've been praying to that Jesus guy every morning and every night that my mom or my dad would come pick me up, and they didn't show, so there's no need for me to go to that Sunday school because he doesn't like me. And she said, okay. And I went out and I got on my grandpa's lap, and I told my grandpa I never want to sit on that front porch ever again. He said, buddy, you never have to sit on that front porch ever again if you don't want to. Right? And I made a decision on his lap that I don't need a God and I don't need a mom and a dad. Right? And I was okay with that. 20 plus years later, I'm sitting on that front porch on a Friday night. I just got released from my detox center thing, and I'm sitting on the front porch waiting for members of Alcoholics Anonymous to come pick me up. And it's not like today where they call you and say, hey, we're 5 minutes away. They would start honking like 3 blocks away, right? To let everybody know that we're picking up Jason and taking him to AA, right? So I'm sitting on the front porch waiting for the first thing. I hear the honking coming, and I'm just petrified. God, come on, man. And then they pull up, and I run down there, and you know who's there to pick me up to take me to my first meeting out of my detox center? It was my dad. So God either says yes, not right now, or I got something better. I just have to trust the process, right? And he took me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous where I met a girl. I kissed her. She got pregnant. This is bad right here. Then she got divorced, and then we got married. Yeah, and that's how I got the name For Christ's Sakes, Jason. Man, and my life changed just like that, man. And but this is the damnedest thing. I was only going to one meeting a month. It was called SSAL. It was a big speaker meeting, about 400 or 500 people. I would go there because I was a raffle chair and I was stealing half the money, which I had to pay back. I know, I paid it back. Don't worry, this guy Tim W. tells everybody when I'm there that he stole the money, but he never tells them I paid it back. But Carl made me pay him back. And, I was only going to that meeting for that, and it was that Saturday I didn't want to go, so I got in a fight with my wife, and I asked her for a divorce. And she said no. I thought you had to negotiate or something like that. She said, I'm going to the meeting, maybe you should go. And I said, screw AA. So she went to the meeting, and I did what I thought every alcoholic does when you're leaving Alcoholics Anonymous. I went and got a big book and a Bible, and I got on my daughter's computer, and I wrote a resignation letter to Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah, it's not that funny. It haunts me to this day, right? I dated it, and I signed it, and I took it to this guy named John B. John B. was out of Billings, Montana, but I thought he was the president of AA of Oregon. And because he had a whole bunch of not-agains, right? You guys call them pigeons, sponsees, greeters, whatever. I call them not-agains because, like, when you pull up to a meeting, there's a whole bunch of them. They want to hug you, shake your hand, ask you how you're doing. I'm like, good God, not again, not the same guys. Or you get called on, they talk about the same thing, God, sponsorship, the allergy of the body, the session of the mind. Yeah, so I just called them not-agains, right? And I thought that's what they were. I didn't know they were certain other names for them. And he had a bunch of them, so I thought he was the president of AA. So I walked up in front of about 400 or 500 people, and I handed my resignation letter to him, and he starts reading it, and he starts laughing. Like really loud laughing, right? And then he passed it around to these not-agains, and and they still pass it around on my sobriety date, right? And I don't even know where it comes from, right? And they're passing around, and they're laughing, and I'm just standing there sweating, right? And he says, no. I go, what do you mean no? He goes, I'm not going to allow you to leave Alcoholics Anonymous. And what accidentally came out of my mouth is, will you sponsor me? He quit laughing just like that. He said, are you willing to go to any link for victory over alcohol? I'm like, man, I was just resigning with a letter. That's going to haunt me for the rest of my sobriety. Yeah. He says, this is what you're going to do. You're going to get on your knees twice a day. You're going to get on your knees and you're going to say, please help, thank you, amen. At night, you're going to get on your knees and you're going to say, thanks. God don't need to hear any more from you. You'll be trying to con him. I was like, all right, that's pretty something. He said, you're going to call me every morning at 6:30 for the first 90 days. You're going to read 2 pages out of the big book every day for the rest of your sobriety. You're going to go to 5 meetings a week, 2 where I'm at. Whew. And then he told me I couldn't drink in between meetings. He said, if you do those things, your life will get better in spite of you. You know what? Within 30 days, I was the head not-again, right? I was the head greeter in my home group. I was self-appointed there, too. But my job in AA was to shake every woman's hand that walked into my home group and look her in the eye and make sure she had a safe place to sit. And every man that walked into there, I had to hug him, tell him I loved him, and I'm doing better every day in every way. Very unnecessary, very uncalled for, very awkward, right? But I did it. I hung out, and I was doing all right. You know what? And my life changed. He took me through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I heard Chris's CD, so I ended up screwing up that part of AA in my area. And you know what I mean? I just became a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. But here's something they don't tell you. At 9 years of sobriety, I couldn't stand you people. Right? You guys celebrated your sobriety dates on the same date every year. The same people came. They said the same nice things about you. If you got called on, you said the same thing every time. There's this one lady, Rachel, would always say, if you don't drink, you don't get drunk. No, crap. Sorry, I almost swore. But it was the same people over and over. So I just sat in the back and I started judging people, right? And I just didn't want to be there. But I did the next best thing. I started selling drugs. Oh, thank you. There's a nod over there going, yeah. You know, these holy states in the Bible Belt don't do that. But I thought it was a great idea, so I started selling drugs, and I got pretty good at it. And I bought a car, and I took it to this place called Les Schwab. I don't know if they have it here. It's a tire place. I took it there. They put some wheels and tires on this car. I pulled out. The wheel fell off, and I crashed. Right? But they said, don't worry, it's our fault. And they rented me this Chrysler 300. It looked like a Rolls Royce. And it said Hemi on the side, and I thought I had arrived. Right? And I got in this car, and I went and met these guys I'd been meeting every day for about a year. I started driving down the street, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of, well, they call it a task force, right? Swarmed my car, right? And there's cops everywhere. And you know, I had a valid driver's license, proof of insurance. It's a rental car. And I haven't had a drink or drug in 9 years. I should probably be able to talk my way out of whatever's going on right here. But I didn't know what to do with the dope, so I put it underneath the front seat, like every drug dealer does. And I waited. And finally, an officer walked up and he tapped on the window. I rolled it down. He said, Jason, which is another bad sign. He didn't even ask me for any identification. He said, could you shut the car off and step up on the curb? And I said, I can do that, right? So I shut the car off and I opened up the door. And as I'm getting out, I hear, and I look down and my seat's going back all by itself, right? I've never had a car with a memory seat and still don't, right? I think my truck does it, but I shut that stuff off right away, right? It went all the way back and my dope's in the middle of the floor, right? And you can't yell time out or do over or anything like that, right? You're kind of committed, right? And I thought, well, maybe they won't see it. Right? So I shut the door and I went up on the curb and they did. I got charged with commercial delivery, commercial possession, racketeering, intimidation of a federal witness, and a gun charge with 9 years of sobriety, going to AA, sitting in the back, stealing a seat. Man, and I burned it to the ground. Burned it to the ground. I put a needle in my arm. I did things I told myself I'd never do. My wife divorced me, which was a good call on her behalf. I I signed the rights away to my daughter for $20 and a ride to a drug house. Man, it just went bad, right? And, about 6 months after that bust, I got sentenced to 48 months in prison. And I remember when I got sentenced, I got put in solitary because if you ever get arrested in the state of Oregon, the sheriff's office has been running the jail system since the 1800s. They don't need your opinion, how they do it, right? And I gave them my opinion, I guess, and I'm in this hole and I'm by myself. And, man, I just had a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear, and I wasn't going to go anywhere for a long time, right? And I could hear John's voice saying, you probably should get on your knees, dummy. And I got on my knees and I said, please help, thank you, amen. I got back up on that bunk. If I got any kind of relief, I got back on my knees and I said, thanks, right? About 3 or 4 days of being locked up by myself saying those prayers, I looked at this piece of metal above the toilet and I saw my reflection, and for the first time in my life, I realized I'm a piece of crap that's not going to amount to nothing. And I don't have no excuse about anything. And I got on my knees and I told God, I think I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol and I need some help. Right? And I got back up on my bunk, and I'm here to tell you from that day on, I've had the obsession to drink and use has gone away. Right? I was locked up, but I wasn't locked up. Right? And I got put into population at 3 months and 27 days. Some judges in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous in my area signed a piece of paper to get me a suspended sentence. So I got released to serve my time in the state of Oregon for 3.5 years, and then I had to do 5 years of parole. And I've been an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing since that day. Unless you go to my home group. They might have a different opinion, right? But man, my life today, I'm grateful for the opportunity I have. I'm grateful to be able to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm grateful to be able to get on a plane and go someplace, right? Because when you're locked up, man, it all goes away, and it went away fast. I had to make some amends when I got out of that thing, right? And one of them was to my daughter. My daughter's 26 years old right now. When I got locked up, she was 7. She's 26 years old. She just got married to a fireman, and man, she's a great kid. She's going to law school. She wants to be a judge, so she's clerking for a judge right now to figure out where she's at. And I remember when she was doing her master's at Portland State, there's a whole bunch of these sorority girls in my house, and they're in the kitchen. I walked in. I heard them talking to my daughter about being president of the United States. So I said, can I have a cabinet position? She said, no, right? Didn't even hesitate, right? Just no. And I said, what can I do at the White House? She said, you could be a greeter. I said, yeah, right? So if she ever makes it to the White House, she better get there fast. I probably won't have the job long. But I remember sitting there and looking at her and being proud. But then all of a sudden, one of the other little girls asked her, he goes, isn't your dad's past going to hurt what you want to do with your life? Without even skipping a beat, my daughter said, my dad's past is my greatest asset. That's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm not the best dad in the world. I always tell this story. My daughter was 17 years old, and my wife came to me and she said, hey, we're going on vacation. I said, where are we going? She said, Canada. I said, I can't get into Canada right now. She goes, we know. And they left, right? They were gone for like 2 weeks. I was at home dog sitting, but I've been told you don't dog sit your own dog, but that's what it felt like I was doing, right? So I'm at home dog sitting, and they're gone for 2 weeks, and they come back, and my daughter goes straight to her room. My wife comes in the kitchen and says, hey, we need to talk. I said, all right. She goes, no, it's important. I said, oh, give it to me. She goes, Bailey got a tattoo. I wasn't ready for that, right? I saw tramp stamp. I saw stripper poles. I saw Aerosmith videos. I saw red. I called my wife names that I don't even think you should call anybody, right? And I told her we're getting a divorce. She's going to jail. And she looked at me like I was pure crazy. So I went upstairs and I yelled at my daughter, who was sitting on her bed crying already, right? Because she could hear what I was saying to her mom. And I yelled at her and I said things to her that if you guys even said one of those things, I have no problem going back to prison, right? And I said things to that little girl that, yeah. And she just sat there and she wasn't communicating with me well, so I did what every good alcoholic does. I told my wife I was going for a drive. She said she kicked me out of the house if she tells the story. But what I did is I got in my car and I called an Al-Anon. Right? This might sound stupid, but if I call Steve, an alcoholic, about my problem, they usually give me the solution before I'm even done explaining the problem, right? They'll tell me, did you pray about it, turn it over, trust God, inventory? I mean, you guys, they have the go-to things, right? Here's the deal with Al-Anon. I haven't been to very many Al-Anon meetings, but something's going on there because I don't know if they listen to everything you say or if they write it down and text it out to other people but it took this lady probably 5 miles before she responded to my problem, right? And I wasn't used to that. And she said, well, you want to know what just happened? And I said, I told you what happened. She goes, you want to know what I heard? And I said, well, yeah. She goes, man, you just told your daughter she's not beautiful, and any decisions she makes are not to your standards, and her body's your body. And she said a lot of stuff that made me sound bad, too. I said, well, I didn't mean any of that. She goes, I know. I go, what do I got to do? She goes, you got to go back and make it right. And I could hear her husband on the phone going, on the speaker going, you better invite God to go with you. So I'm like, AA, always trying to get in the way, right? And so I got back to my driveway and I invited God to go with me. And, you know, I heard Jack W. say this one time. He let God go in first, right? He opened up the door and let God go in first. And I remember I went in that house and I told my wife I overreacted. And she said, oh, you did. And the dog's not even hanging out with me anymore, right? So I went upstairs. And my daughter's on her bed still crying. And I apologized. I said, man, I'm an idiot. I don't care what you do with your body. I don't care what you believe in. I don't care anything. As long as you're happy, I'm happy. Whatever you love, I love, right? I should have never said any of those things, and I'm wrong, and I'm sorry for that. She goes, I know, Dad. We knew you were going to overreact. And so I became a victim right away, right? And I said, well, maybe you could have texted me. She said, you think that would have worked? I was like, probably not. And she goes, you want to see the tattoo? Sure. And she lifts up her shirt, and on the side of her chest, there's an AA symbol that says one day at a time. And there's a hand going like this and a hand going like this, right? So my first thought is, God, I hope you're not an alcoholic. And second, what's with the praying hands? We're not Catholic. But I didn't say, those are all inside voices now, right? And she goes, you want to know what it means? I said, sure. She said, if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous, you and Mom would have never met and I wouldn't be here. I was like, oh, that's pretty good. You know, and she said, the hand going like this is Mom's because she always makes the coffee. The hand going like this is yours, Dad, because you're always welcoming people to Alcoholics Anonymous and give them a hand up. So now I'm on this bed crying, right? This lady, Paulie P., told me that was God kicking me in the nuts. I wasn't crying. So I avoid her like the plague too, right? And, but I got to make that. I was able to make an ass of myself, and I was able to make that okay. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me and my family, right? It's made it so that we can make mistakes, but we can make it right. You know, I'll end with this. You know, or get with this. You know, I had to make amends to my grandparents. Right, I got to the steps that I had to make amends to my grandparents. My grandpa was still alive. My grandma was dead. I didn't know how I was going to do the grandma thing, but I went to my grandpa's house to say, Grandpa, hey, I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm in AA. He said, Jason, everybody knows you're in AA. I said, well, there's this step. He goes, I've been waiting. He said, yeah. Obviously, my uncle had been there before me, right? And I said, I stole a lot of money and borrowed a lot of money from you and Grandma, and I don't know how much. He goes, I do. Right? And he goes into my grandma's bedroom and he comes back out with these spiral notebooks. My grandma was like the mob. Right? She had everything written down from like 1977. Jason borrowed 25 cents. Jason got credit for picking up 2 cents an apple. You know, I had a lot of insurance payments. I had a lot of car payments. I had a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with it. A lot of doctor's appointments. But there was a lot of money right there that I had borrowed and stole. Right? I told my grandpa, I can't pay all this back. He goes, I know you can. I said, what do I got to do? He said, you just got to keep helping people. I said, that's a great idea. But when you read these books, it's kind of like your history of your life, right? It was funny, sad. But in 1984, it said Jason stole $5. Jason stole $5. Jason stole $5. Jason stole $5. So I said, hey, Grandpa, how do you know I stole $5 in 1984? He goes, oh, that's an easy one. I go, oh, yeah? He goes, yeah, every Thursday I put $5 in the coffee cup in the hutch, and every Friday morning it was gone. The only people that live here are the author of the books, the person who put the money in the cup, and you. Well, you don't have to be Perry Mason to figure that one out, right? And so I said, well, why don't you tell me to stop? Right? And here's the guy that I thought hated me all my life and was out to get me. But he said something to me, it changed me. He said, Jason, stealing isn't wrong until it's wrong to you. And I'd rather you steal from me than our neighbors or your friends. And that's the guy I thought was out to get me. And I left that place, and I called my sponsor, John. He said, how much do you have to pay back? I said, nothing. And so I went back and told my grandpa, that's not going to work. And I ended up getting my grandpa cable TV till the day he died. Right? That's what we agreed on. But the coolest thing about that is 2 weeks after he got cable TV, he called me and said, man, do you have cable TV? I said, everybody has cable TV, Grandpa. And we started talking about Pawn Stars. We talked about the History Channel. We talked about ESPN being on 24 hours a day. I mean, he watched every single channel. He gave every channel 10 minutes, even that one that just buzzes, right? And at the end of that talk, he said, man, this is the coolest gift anybody's ever given me. And that was me making an amends, right, to him. And when he died, we were good. We were on the same page, and he knew I loved him. My grandma, on the other hand, she was dead. I didn't know how to make that amends, right? Because I wrote letters. I went to the gravesite. I looked for dragonflies, butterflies, potato bugs, ants. You guys told me to do a lot of things, and I did them. But I couldn't get rid of that ache, right? I had this ache that I would just, I don't know, it just killed me, right? I could do all this stuff, and I could get relief, but I couldn't get rid of that ache. And I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what to do. And one day I'm flying home from a convention, and this guy sends me a story because he tells me that he gives me clear-gut directions a lot, but I balk, right? But he told me he tells me a story, I pay attention. And if you tell me a story and I can feel it, you got me, right? And there was a story about this little boy who was the firstborn in his family. And his sisters were born, and his dad started paying attention to his sisters, and he got really jealous. But he knew his dad loved football, so he asked his parents if he could play football, and they signed him up right away. And right away, he realized he shouldn't be playing football, right? He's a trumpet kid, right? But after every single practice and every single game, his dad would come find him and give him a hug and tell him he loved him and how proud he was of him. And so the kid just kept playing and kept playing and kept playing. His senior year, his team's going to the state championship for the first time. And it's 2 weeks before the big game, and his coach calls him over at practice in front of all the other kids and says, "Look, I don't know how to tell you this, but your dad had a heart attack today and he didn't make it." And the young man hit his knees and he started crying. And he got back up and he asked the coach, "Is it okay if I go home a little early today?" And the coach said, "Man, this is just a game. Go home and take care of your family. Don't worry about football." And so the big game came 2 weeks later, and it's like the third quarter and his team's losing and he doesn't show up. But eventually he runs out, right? And everybody starts cheering because they know it's him. And he runs up to the coach. He asks the coach if he can play. And the coach is like, "Whatever. We're losing anyway. Go in there." First play, the kid intercepts the ball and runs it back for a touchdown. And the coach says, "Just stay in the game." The kid ends up tackling things, and then he ends up winning the game for his school, right? The worst player in his school history just won the first state championship for this school. And, man, it's a big deal. Everybody's excited and cheering and all that. And that night when the coach is leaving the locker room, he sees a young man sitting all by himself in the back, and he walks up to him and says, "Man, take as long as you want." He goes, "I know it's your senior year. Just take as long as you want. Don't worry about getting out of here." The young man says, "Thanks, Coach." Coach says, "Hey, I need to ask you something." He goes, "You're really not the best athlete I've ever coached. What happened out there tonight? That was a phenomenal game of football." And the young man says, "Coach, I don't know if you know this or not, but after every game or every practice, even the games that I lost for us or I sat on the bench and you didn't play me, no matter what, my dad would come give me a hug and tell me he loved me and how proud he was of me." And the coach said, "You had a good dad." He goes, "I did." And as the coach is walking away, the young man says, "Coach, I don't know if you know this or not." He goes, "What's that?" He goes, "My dad was blind. And tonight's the first night he ever really got to see me play." And just like that, I got relief. Because every time I go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and I say, "My name's Jason Johnson, I'm an alcoholic," my grandma gets to see that. Anytime I sit down and I go through that book with somebody else, my grandma gets to see that. I owe that to you guys. That might not be a big deal to some of you, but if you're an alcoholic who's traded everything away, it's a big deal, right? And it gave me closure. I know that when I die, I'm going to that big meeting in the sky first thing. I'm going there to make sure there's a Bill, a Bob, and a Jesus, right? That's the only reason I'm going, because if they're not there, there's going to be some issues, right? But I know who'll be waiting to greet me. It'll be my grandparents, right? They'll be in the parking lot waiting. And I know if my grandpa thinks if you're not a half hour early, you're late. And I don't know how that works when you're dead. But he'll wave at me because he thinks I never know where I'm going, right? And but here's the thing. For the first time in my life as an adult male, I'm going to be able to hug my grandpa and look him in the eyes and thank him for giving me a safe place to live. And more importantly, telling him I love him. My grandma, on the other hand, she'll probably be praising Jesus and thanking God and telling my grandpa, "I told you so." You know what I mean? And I know what she's going to do. She's going to kiss me. She's going to hug me. She's going to tell me she loves me. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to be able to look my grandma in the eye and say, "Grandma, it's the damnedest thing. These people in this program called Alcoholics Anonymous, they found a solution to their problem and they introduced it to me. But most importantly, Grandma, some of those people showed me some grace. And in doing that, they introduced me to this kid inside of here that only you believed existed. I never want to be able to pay that debt back, right? And I'm grateful for that. You know, look, I'm going to tell a story. And the only reason I'm telling this story is because Lulu made me, right? I told her one time, she picked me up to take me. So when you go to California, they make you speak a lot, right? And so she picked me up to take me a couple places, and we went to dinner before, and I told her this story. She goes, "You need to tell that to the people." I said, "Oh, I'm never going to tell anybody that story." She goes, "You're going to tell people that story?" I said, "Lulu, I'm not going to tell that story. You can't make me." So I got done with my talk, and when I got done, I looked at her. She's going, yeah, like what the? Yeah, she's right there doing the same thing, like, and nobody was moving. I'm like, "I'm done." She goes. So I told the story, and what it did is it changed my perspective of that story. You know, and it's this story. You go, you know, look. I had to speak at the Indiana State Convention right? And then I got there, and it's the 5 Midwestern states, and it's all the politics of AA, right? And as soon as I got off, I told this guy who was hosting me, I said, oh, you got the wrong guy, right? I'm the reason they have business meetings, right? I'm not here to vote on anything, for Christ's sakes. I'm the wrong guy. I don't even know anything about it. I'm just not the guy that should be speaking at this. He goes, oh, no, you are. I said, oh, no. What I'll do is I'll pay for my own flight home. I'll fly one of my friends out here. They'll do the talk. Everything will be great. He goes, no, you're the guy we want. And the slogan for this conference that weekend was a seat for everyone. And I just thought, oh, that'll bite them in the butt. Let's just show them what they got, the mistake they made, right? I had a blast that weekend, right? I got to see AA work in a way that I never seen work. Because when I'm at home, in my own hometown, I'm judging, and I don't like the people that are saying this stuff, right? And I'm not open-minded, man. And I got to see votes. I got to see this. I had to hear reports. And, man, I just had a blast. And that night, I had to speak at their banquet meeting. And at the end of that meeting, they have these things called gratitude lines, which I don't know why they call it a gratitude line, because people stand in line, come up to you, said, my sponsor said, I have to thank you for an hour of my life I'll never get back, and they walk off. Or if somebody cusses you out because you freaking said the F word, or you talked about drugs, or how did you get married to a divorced lady? I mean, people really listen to certain spots, right? And so I'm in this line going, yeah. And I look to see how long the line is, and I lock eyes with this little old lady, and I went, oh, she's mad, right? And so I look, and she's just staring at me. I'm like, oh, this is the one. I'm screwed, right? I know she's mad about something. So I'm like, thank you. And I think, man, she should be here by now. And I look up, and she's gone. And I just got relieved, right? But I made a mistake. I looked at the back of the line, and there she was staring at me. And I'm like, this is no good, right? And it gets down to her and I, and she's standing there, and I'm standing here, and she's looking at me, and I'm looking at her. I'm like, whatever. Give it to me. She goes, I'm a grandma. Can I give you a hug? Aww. Yeah. I said, absolutely. Right? I had no problem with that, right? So I hugged her, and we started talking. What I find out is she has a granddaughter who's 24 years old who's out there running and gunning and doing a lot of bad things with her body. And a lot of people are saying a lot of bad things about her. But she said, she's my granddaughter, and I don't want to give up on her. And I said, that's good. And she goes, you want to know something? She goes, I'm not a member of Al-Anon. I'm not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. The only reason I'm here tonight is because my friend who prays for my granddaughter every Sunday, her and her husband had banquet tickets, and he got sick, and she called me about 20 minutes before to see if I wanted to come hear a story of hope. And I want to thank you for giving me some hope. And I kind of just stood there, okay, you know what I mean? And she starts to walk off. She goes, hey, do you know why your grandma wrote all that stuff down in those books? I said, no, I don't. She goes, I know why. And I go, why is that? She goes, because your grandma knew that all the bad things you were doing, no matter what people were saying about you, that one day you would come back and make it right. And I just started crying. I wasn't crying because I was sad or I was scared. I was crying because I was grateful for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I sat down in this chair, and I'm rubbing my head. And I look down, I see these big feet, and I look up, and there's this big guy just crying. I stood up. He goes, I felt that. I was like, I didn't touch you, right? There's no need to relax, right? He goes, yeah, I felt that. I go, what'd you feel? He goes, man, I got goosebumps. When that lady was talking to you, I heard everything she said, and I got goosebumps. I said, holy crap, you know what that was? He goes, what? I go, that was God rubbing your back, telling you you're welcome, right? And he just looked at me kind of crazy, and we talked a little bit, and he walked off, right? A year later, or 6 months later, I was at the South Carolina State Convention or something like that, and I was talking, and they had a gratitude line there, too, and at the end of the line, there's this guy standing there, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at me, and I'm looking at him. He goes, you know who I am? I go, no. He goes, I'm Paul, the guy in your story. I was like, wow, you shaved. He goes, yeah. And we talked a little bit, and he goes, can I talk to you? And I said, sure. And we went over to the table, and we sat down, and we started talking, and what he told me is when he met me 6 months before that, he had just done a second step with his sponsor. About 3 months before that, and he was willing to believe there was a God, but he just didn't believe that God knew who he was. Right? So every morning he would get on his knees. He said, God, I don't know if you know who I am, but my name is Paul. Could you help me stay sober today? He said, I was doing that and doing that and doing that. And when you told me that when I got those goosebumps, that was God touching my back. It changed my life. He goes, I use the same prayer you do today, Jason. He goes, I tell everybody, my dear friend, if you see fit and be thy will, I sure appreciate it if I could stay in Alcoholics Anonymous another day. I damn near missed that. Thanks.